I'm Mike.
I'm Sam.
I'm Jack.
Let's get into it.
Everyone knows that meme. You know, F it. Jamar's down there somewhere. I'm going to just throw it up to him. He's going to make a play.
Welcome to episode 64 of newly named Gent and Sweep Sports. I'm accompanied by Michael Scalzo and our new co-host, Jack Murphy. I am Sam Cerrone. So we're excited to get back into the grind. We're going to start off with our daily news for the past couple of weeks of sports, do our weekly quarterback, and then do the first ever Week 18 NFL Pickum with the newly expanded season. So daily news, obviously we had some NFL games this past week. We'll probably get into those more with the Gent and Sweep of the week, but big, college football week. We had the bowl games, New York Six, the college football playoff. So let's start off with talking about, Bama versus Cincy and Georgia versus Michigan. What were you guys' thoughts on those two games?
I think the bigger game has to be the Michigan-Georgia game, right, Sam? I mean, we were happy to see Michigan get destroyed like that and be more competitive than Cincy. I mean, or less competitive than Cincy, excuse me. I mean, who thought that?
Yeah, no. So I think with Michigan, it always comes back to the quarterback play. I feel like they always struggle, whether it's throughout the season or in that big game with that quarterback play. And we saw, again, bad quarterback play from Michigan, kind of changing quarterbacks halfway through and that not being the answer. Bennett did really good in this game, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. But I thought this was a good transition for Georgia going into Alabama, facing a team with a tougher defense, a bit of a good test for Georgia. And I think they project well after this bowl game going into the national championship.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Bama game, like it was 10-3 going into the half. Cincinnati was playing tough. It kind of got busted open in the second half. But I just think it's, I know obviously Cincy, a lot of people didn't really think they were going to play well. But I think it's just for their program going down the road. You have Luke Fickell not leaving and going to a bigger program. I think it's going to be both really well for Cincinnati for the coming years. They go into the playoff for the first time as a Group of 5 team. They have a great, culture. They're building it even, more over the next few years. So I think the future's bright in Cincy, and I loved watching Michigan get their throats stepped on by Georgia.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with Cincinnati, it's very, very vital now with, I think, potentially a lot of college football openings at the head coaching position and potentially in the NFL as well, some head coaching positionings getting opened. I think it's vital for Cincinnati to retain their head coach with this great culture, with better recruiting with this head coach. But I thought in this Alabama game, talking about Alabama a little bit, I thought it was a good sign seeing Brian Robinson Jr. running the ball. And with him watching that game, off the top of my head, I don't think he had any large runs like 30, 40, 50-yard runs, but it was just a steady pace of 8 yards, 10 yards, 12 yards. And I think that's going to be key in order to beat Georgia, those steady runs.
For Michigan, Georgia, just to take it back there, Georgia and Michigan just seems so similar to me coming into that game. And Michigan, me and Sam as Ohio State fans, we've seen them win for a couple years with, 50, 60-point games. And Michigan completely changed their coaching this year, bringing in a D coordinator and kind of completely changing, going from trying to run a spread offense and just deciding, we're going to beat you by being tougher. And it obviously worked against Ohio State. They completely caught that team off guard by not being with that team not being ready to play smash mouth football. But then they go play Georgia, and I mean, you guys see those highlights of Hutchinson and some of the linemen. I mean, Jordan Davis and Nolan Smith just had a field day, and just to get out tough like that. And now the rumors of Harbaugh leaving. I mean, who knows what happens to Michigan?
I mean, I don't know. I think it would be pretty stupid if, he has his best year at Michigan. I mean, I guess you can go back to maybe 2016, because obviously he hasn't made the playoff before, and then he just wants to leave after. I just think that's even if he stays at Michigan, that kind of hurts the relationship with his players. That they're his players are leaving the field, and there's videos of them being like, "We'll be back," and then you see reports 2 days later saying that Harbaugh might leave. So that kind of puts a little strain on the relationship. I know college football is. The coaching carousel is a big part of college football, but I think that's just a awful thing to do to your players when you have such a, a good end to the year, with your best year ever.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think he changes college football programs. I'd be very shocked to see that. at Michigan, you just had such a successful year. Again, you have such a lucrative contract. You have all the ties to Jordan. I don't think that happens necessarily, but do I see him potentially leaving for the Raiders? I honestly do. I think Jim Harbaugh is a super competitive guy. I think he's always kind of had one foot in the NFL door just from an idea perspective. He was a very successful NFL coach at one time, going to a Super Bowl. And then what I want to say he was out of the NFL 3 years after that Super Bowl appearance, seeing his brother year in and year out have successful teams. I think that NFL blood is still within him. I think the Raiders are a good enough situation for Jim Harbaugh to be persuaded to leave. And I think most importantly, the Raiders organization is always historically an organization who gives the entire keys to the city to the head coach. So I think if that happens, he has managerial authority in that organization as well. Then I do think he leaves for the Raiders.
I think that's a good take there, Mike, and sense of like them giving him the keys kind of being why, because I was wondering why would he want to leave. The other place I'd heard was Chicago, and obviously he had played there, and then they clearly have a quarterback who could be good. I just don't know why you'd want to go to Vegas besides them handing you the keys. I mean, I'm not a big Derek Carr guy. I think Derek Carr should have been gone a couple years ago. I mean, these proving that he's clearly overpaid. He's not the guy you pay the money he makes to and expect him to carry a team that doesn't have as much talent as they do. And, you know, they're coming off of the last couple of years, some pretty brutal draft picks in the first round, especially that year where they, you know, traded Khalil Mack and Cooper. You know, they're going to have Jacobs and Jonathan Abrams and that I forget who was there. Colton Miller. I mean, those guys are all pretty average players, and you know, I don't know. There just doesn't seem like there's much of a foundation there versus, like Sam said, coming off your best year at Michigan.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. When Jim Harbaugh joined Michigan, there wasn't too much of a foundation there either. And to me, again, I think it's if he gets total complete reign and just keys to the city in Las Vegas, I don't think he goes there just as the head coach. I think Jim Harbaugh is, maybe I can use the word naive enough to believe that his culture and his ideas in terms of roster building is good enough to kind of flip that city on its head. But we'll see with Jim Harbaugh. Again, if I had to bet on something right now, I would bet he stays in Michigan because, again, like you said, the structure is there. Everything is there, really.
Also, he's just making millions of dollars at Michigan. The thing is, like, if the Raiders beat the Chargers, we'll talk about that later in our pick'em. They beat the Chargers. They make the playoffs. Like, how do you fire? I always botch his name, Rick Pistachio. Like, how do you fire him once you make the playoffs after having so much turmoil through a year? Like, I just think that might drive a couple players wrong because they bought into Rick Pistachio's system after he became the head coach. So, like, I know he's an interim head coach. He's not really supposed to be in this position, but if you make it to the playoffs somehow, like, how are you gonna turn your back on a guy that a lot of players seem to like?
That's true. And see, that's the issue with hiring an interim coach. And that's why usually they are the special teams coach, because you're most comfortable with letting your special teams coach go rather than your offensive or defensive coordinator. I think Rich Bisaccia and his success is more about culture rather than schematics. So I can envision a future where they keep him for 1 or 2 years during this kind of null period with Derek Carr, wait till he gets out of his contract, then make a big push for a Jim Harbaugh-esque coach. But you're right, Sam. I think especially if they make the playoffs, they probably stick with Rich Bisaccia. But you know, Vegas, they're always going for the flashy move. They love the name. That's why they hired John Harbaugh in the first place, or John Gruden in the first place, I should say. So I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to make a splash with a splashy, fiery name as well.
Yeah, no, I think you guys are 100% right. I mean, with all that turmoil, who knows about whether that's the way to go, but he has overcome a lot this year to get them into that playoff spot. And I mean, what a huge win against your Colts, Sam. I mean, who would have?
We got beat.
Kind of shows that
the game.
Kind of shows that Mike might be onto something with his Carson Wentz talk, but sorry, pal.
Circling. We don't need to talk about the Colts. We can circle into a new direction. So with the national championship being on Monday, what do we have here? What are our picks or our what are our predictions?
I guess I'll start with my prediction. This is such a boring, lame take. I do think Alabama grinds it out in more of a boring kind of Alabama-Cincinnati-esque game where, 6-0, 10-0, 10-7 going into halftime. And then I think Alabama just kind of pulls away. I really like what Georgia's done this season. They were a very low-key team, I think, all season. They end up making the big dance. They end up going to the national championship. I just think with Brian Robinson Jr., again, not those flashy runs, but that steady pace of 8 yards, 7 yards, 6 yards. I think that's enough. Will Anderson's another guy I love on Alabama, a standout defensive player. He had 2 sacks, and I want to say 2 tackles for loss as well. I think that's just going to be just enough to get Alabama for the win. But I do anticipate a closer game.
Mike, I think you're 100% right. Like, it may be the take to, like, the lame take to say Bama, but I lost a lot of faith in that Georgia. I mean, beating Michigan and beating a non-SEC team to get back to the national championship is one thing. Beating Bama is the goal. Is what you strive to do each year in that program when you get there in August and July for the season. Like, they have so many guys and they have so many stars, but they're trying to beat Bama by being what Bama did in 2011 and 2012 and being that O-line driven, run the ball offense, and then that defense of just a bunch of dogs. I mean, they are Bulldogs, right? I mean, they got probably 4 or 5 first-round picks on that defense in the next 2 drafts. I mean, they're stacked. But Bama has the 2 best players, I'd say, in the country, in Bryce Young and Will Anderson. And then they got the best coach ever. And I think that Michi being out is going to hurt them because it clearly did against Cincinnati. But Cincinnati does have 2 better corners in Kobe Bryant and Sauce Gardner than Darian Kendrick. And, oh, my God, isn't he the man? But Darian Kendrick is just such a bum, even though he's a 5-star. He had a great game against Michigan, but, I mean, it's Michigan. Their receivers are nothing like what Bama's are, even though the Mechie injury could really hurt them. Until Georgia, I want it to be Georgia, but until they show me that they can do it, then I don't believe it.
Yeah, I'm gonna give the clean sweep to Bama here. I'm just not confident in Stetson Bennett to get it done. I like watching him. I mean, he's a fun player, the mailman, a fan favorite, but I just don't see him be able to beat this, this tough Alabama front. I think Bryce Young is going to have quite the game. He showed it in the SEC championship game. He had quite the game, and I think he's going to continue it. And, 14 years ago, yesterday, Nick Saban got hired at Alabama, and he just hasn't looked back since. I think they're going to add another one to that shelf.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And kind of transitioning, one point I did want to bring up and mention to you guys, as a NFL fan, I kind of watch college football with the intent to look at the best quarterbacks in the nation. That's what always fascinates me. I always try to catch games with potentially good quarterback play. And I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name, but DJ, the starting quarterback on Clemson, has really fascinated me because he's really struggled. And I caught the Clemson-Iowa State game. Clemson won despite another horrible performance by DJ. I want to read you guys off some names. So Phillip Sims, Jeff Driscoll, Max Brown, Kyle Allen, Josh Rosen, Shea Patterson, Davis Mills, Trevor Lawrence, and now DJ. These are all the number 1 recruits, the best quarterbacks in the nation going into their freshman year in college. None of these guys have had NFL success, and most of these guys haven't even been that successful at a college football level. So what do you guys think that these scouts are missing? Because watching this game, it was just like, I don't want to see DJ take another snap in college football. He needs to go to baseball and just ride with his baseball thing.
So Sam, I think Michael hit it on the head, except for Lawrence is clearly a product of his team. And I think he's clearly a good player.
Yes.
I mean, he hasn't had the game. I mean, Zach Wilson looks like Trey Lance on Sunday looked like they've had better games than Trevor Lawrence in an individual, like, pick out this box score. It looks like who's better, right? But I mean, I was actually at the Patriots Jaguars game with my dad and my brother this weekend, and The Patriots may not be the best team in the league, but the thing with Belichick is especially what you've seen with Mac Jones and Newton as the quarterback versus Brady these last 2 years, is when they play a team who's so poorly coached, they're going to blow the doors off you. They beat the Jaguars and the Jets twice by 40. I mean, their 2 games in the last 3 years where they've hung 50 on teams have been this year to the Jets and the Jaguars. And, just teams that just have no idea what's going on, just poorly coached, penalties, like mistakes. That's where Trevor Lawrence is. I don't know how the Jaguars get out of this. I don't know if you saw that. The Jaguars have this online petition for all these people to wear clown suits and bring signs to fire this GM, Balky. I mean, they are just they will never get out of their way. And I think you listed off a bunch of bums and then a guy in Trevor Lawrence who's clearly a stud, but he's doomed. He's so doomed.
Yeah.
I just think with these in college, in high school they're the guy, they can do whatever they want, but then once they get to the college level, they kind of just plateau a little bit, and I think there's just no room for improvement. There's no room to more develop their skill set further than it is right there. That's why I think there's so many you go even further into the NFL, and a lot of these NFL stars, like J.J. Watt was a 3-star, Russell Wilson was a 2-star. They have so much potential. Just while they're in college, they just don't have that they don't grow as much. And then these guys that come in as 5-stars, they're already at the level they've been the same level for years. And I just think that teams are able to catch up with them, and different athletes grow more and they become better physical specimens and better smarter in the football game. So I just think that for so long they think they've been the guy, and then they just plateau, and it's just hard for them to to catch up, and they just fall behind.
And so, Sam, I remember my number one worry for Trevor Lawrence, and if you go back and watch our QB video about the draft class, what I kept saying about Trevor Lawrence, it's such a red flag when a guy's freshman year in college is debatably his best year. When you don't see that freshman year to sophomore year to junior year progression where the guy is legitimately getting better, even if not statistically, but is legitimately getting better with progressing through reads, with anticipation. And with Trevor Lawrence, what really, really worried me is I thought he was at his best his freshman year. So I always worried about Trevor Lawrence. Did he peak in high school? If you insert a senior year of high school Trevor Lawrence to the Jaguars, how much worse is he than right now Trevor Lawrence? And obviously physically, lifting weights, all that, growing into his body a little bit more. He's better now, but I'm not sure how much better. And that's something that makes me nervous about Trevor Lawrence. And looking back on these names I named, all their issues were they peaked in high school. And with Trevor Lawrence, I think that might be a potential, even though I agree with all the points you said, Jack, about the situation being horrible. I think if Trevor Lawrence was on the Patriots, he'd clearly be the best rookie quarterback. But
also, I like how Sam was talking about the plateauing, because I think a big thing to bring it back to coaching, Sam can attest to this, especially watching the Ohio State Clemson game of last year. Just the coaching is terrible. No, the offensive coordinator for Elliott, overrated, running that college system for Clemson. Just no way of losing. Travis Etienne killed them when they played real teams, because he was their safety net. There's a reason they thought he was going to catch 80 balls before he hurt his foot this year, because he is that good out of the backfield. That's how that was one of the ways they pulled it out in Trevor Lawrence's sophomore year when they beat Ohio State. There was a lot of reasons Ohio State lost that game, but just clearly it should have been a much more bigger Clemson win. But just they run their basic college system versus, you see so many kids committing to Ohio State and Bama now, because at quarterback those two teams are clearly running NFL systems. I mean, Saban has an offensive coordinator from the NFL running out every year, whether it's Dayball or Bill O'Brien this year. Sarkisian was in the NFL for a couple of years. Lane Kiffin was a head coach. And then you got Ohio State. They're play caller is Ryan Day, who Urban Meyer found from the NFL. And, those guys are, maybe they're not winning. I mean, at least in Ohio State's case, they're not winning a championship every year, going to playoff every year. Bama is. But that pro system is clearly helping those guys at every position when they get in the league. And when you take the quarterback, you get Clemson. I mean, it was so evident in that game last year. They went right down the field in the first quarter, and then they kind of slowed down in the second quarter. And then Ryan Day actually made some halftime adjustments, and they shut down Clemson. It wasn't even a game. And it was because they were like, we're going to do it our way and run our pretty much a high school system.
Yeah. And if you look at it, like that one year they beat Ohio State, and then the next year they got absolutely throttled by Ohio State. Like Clemson or Trevor Lawrence, kind of put on the Superman cape in that first game and kind of took over, and he was, had that massive run and all this thing. And then the next year he gets just destroyed. I think it's just, teams like knew what he was going to, Ohio State knew what he was going to play like the second time they played him. The first time it was kind of a little bit of an unknown, but now they see him again. They're like, all right, we know some of this guy's tendencies. That's why it's just like these guys that are so like 5-stars are so, easy to catch on because they've been using the same bag of tricks their whole career.
Yeah, and with Clemson, it's kind of the manipulating the hash marks. It's just the college skill set is being utilized to the fullest at programs like Clemson, which is why I think sometimes some quarterbacks coming out of these programs do have a harder transition going into the NFL. I think one of the major kind of stripes of Deshaun Watson's young career, even though he's such a great quarterback, was holding on to the ball way too long, waiting for receivers to get open instead of anticipating them to get open. I think that's what we've seen in Jacksonville so far too with Trevor Lawrence. Again, I think it's majority Jacksonville and their wrongdoing, but I do think Trevor Lawrence has had some hiccups some people didn't anticipate going into his NFL career.
So moving into our next segment, we have our weekly quarterback where we're going to go around, say who was the gent of the week, aka top performance, who was the sweep of the week, aka a poor performance. Who wants to go first for their gent?
I can go first. I have a cheat because I had to go with a college player as well as an NFL player. I was deciding between Burrow and Tom Brady, and I had to highlight Brady a little bit just because of how down Tampa Bay looks. Halfway through the season, they looked like they were on track to run this back and be a legit contender for finally being the team that wins back-to-back Super Bowls. And now with all these injuries, they've been down. They had that terrible Saints game. And I know it's the Jets, but I mean, that Antonio Brown situation is something that no team would want on them. And that is totally the game where, you've lost, coming off a game like the Saints in the last couple of weeks, guys getting hurt left or right. And then you have this complete crybaby incident where a guy is in one end zone freaking out. That's a team ender. You lose that game to the Jets, like you're going to the playoffs. Your season's over. Like you got to rally the guys hard. And I mean, Brady just did what he does and put on his mask and cape and kind of saved their season. But I had to highlight Stroud because I wanted to talk. Sam, one thing, but Michael, you love your quarterbacks. As Ohio State guys, especially me and Sam watching CJ Stroud, I think we liked the idea of him playing. Obviously, we knew he was no Justin Fields. And I mean, you go to any comment section, even after wins, it's like bench Stroud. And, he got a Heisman finalist this year. And it was like, well, I was excited for him. I thought he was probably worthy of it. But, they did have 3 first-round picks at receiver. And then Travion Henderson looks like he's going to be a first or second-round pick in a couple of years. And that Utah team has a lot of NFL players on it. And that game was just crazy. I couldn't believe, they were down, 25 scholarship players as well. And, Ohio State now looks like they might have a legit chance to, especially if Jim Harbaugh leaves. But they look like they've got a legit chance to win the national championship next year. And because, you never really know who is the favorites coming into a college season because it can just change like that after a couple of weeks. But wow, I got a lot more faith in next year's team after that Rose Bowl game.
So Jack, I've been very excited to ask you this question. This is something I asked Sam off camera, but I'm going to ask you on camera right now for the both of you, since both of you I would consider kind of Ohio State experts. You guys watch most, if not every single game the past, 4 or 5 years. And this isn't a rhetorical question. This is like a genuine question I have. What, if any, differences do you see between CJ Stroud as a pro prospect and Dwayne Haskins as a pro prospect? Because to me, they are very similar.
Ooh, great. Because I think the Haskins thing, I fell in for that a little bit because I obviously watched them a lot that year. Almost about to go to school next year. And just so many crossing routes. Dump it off to Paris Campbell, dump it off to Curtis Samuel, who are now pretty notorious NFL. I mean, they both get hurt all the time, but
yeah,
they're no stars. The guy who's the best receiver off of that team is McLaurin, who is the deep threat. They also just were kind of relegated to all they could do was throw the ball that year. I mean, that's pretty much all they could do this year, but there are a couple times Sam knows where Henderson put on his mask and cape and won them some games to keep the season alive. But I think the way they pushed the ball down the field and 2 of the touchdowns to Marvin Harrison were pretty. And that the last Smith and Jigba touchdown too. I mean,
that was one of the best.
Obviously, Smith and Jigba is crazy good. But I was thinking about how last year Stroud won the second team job, and him and Smith and Jigba was the slot receiver for that second team. So all year in practice, those two were working it together, and they clearly have a crazy chemistry on the field together. And I don't know, Stroud throws a really better ball than Haskins, and he's also taken some huge hits in the pocket. I don't know. He just seems like he's got more guts, and he's just got a better accuracy arm than Haskins ever did.
Yeah, I think Stroud just has a way better arm than Haskins is. I think with Haskins, I think a lot of those plays were just scripted, one read plays. But I think Stroud really goes out there and makes multiple reads, and he's more of a sheriff out there, if you will. He's not really just a robot in there. I think he's more natural at quarterback. I can't really get mad at Dwayne Haskins. He had one of the best quarterback seasons of all time at Ohio State. I just think some of these throws that, like Jackson, some of these throws that Stroud can make, I don't think Haskins would be able to make.
Yeah, and I'm very excited to see what is to come in store for CJ Stroud. But going on Dwayne Haskins for just a second, I think him not being the backup in Pittsburgh is more stubbornness from the Pittsburgh organization, going with familiarity over somebody who I genuinely think is better than Mason Rudolph. I honestly refuse to believe that Dwayne Haskins isn't as good as, if not better than, Mason Rudolph. I don't see any point in why Mason Rudolph got snaps this year and Dwayne Haskins has been in street clothes. So even though Dwayne Haskins wasn't the prospect that we hoped he could be, I'm still holding out a little bit of hope for his NFL career.
Well, also, I just think the big thing will be for Stroud coming out of the NFL, just giving him such a better chance, will be starting a second season. Yeah. I was listening to something today about from Joel Klatt talking about the NFL quarterbacks who he had combined since Brady's first Super Bowl, the attempts in college that these Super Bowl winning quarterbacks have thrown. And the average is like 10,000. The only two that hadn't done that were Aaron Rodgers, who's, generational, and then Brady, because, Michigan isn't allowed to claim him. They tried to bench him, right? And so every other guy, and they were talking about how they love Kenny Pickett because he's, on 50 games played. He had 16,000 attempts in college when he started 3 years. And, Haskins had the best, he has the most touchdowns and yards of in a single season, any guy ever in the history of the Big Ten. But that 1 year, I think playing one, see with Trubisky, I mean, you can name all these guys who are, I think Zach Wilson is good. That's going to hurt him. Trey Lance. And I mean, I could be naming off all these bums, but I mean, the reason they're bums is because I think they just a lack of experience and just playing quarterback. It's an experienced position. That's why Tom Brady is, I know he's a health nut, but that's why he's better at 44 than he was at 24, because he's used experience, which is weird in football. Like you have it's few time, especially at any other position. You lose your knee, you lose your shoulder, you're done. But at quarterback, you've seen guys like Rodgers and Brady get better with age because they know everything now.
Yeah, and I think experience is a reason why Tom Brady is able to play today, and I think it's a reason why Big Ben was able to play in the modern era. I think a reason why a lot of pocket quarterbacks without that athleticism, without that ability to extend the play with their athleticism, I think the reason Drew Brees is another example. I think a reason why they were able to succeed in this era of athleticism, of defensive ends running a 4.6 40, is because of that experience they had in the 2000s, because their processor is so quick from 10, 15 years of experience to the point where they're good. Whereas looking at a guy like Jacob Eason, when he's inserted into the modern era, he doesn't really succeed because he doesn't have 10 years to develop under an NFL where the athleticism and everything else isn't rapid speed like it is today. So I think kind of developing that processor is so important for not only quarterbacks like Jacob Eason, but just quarterbacks in general. So I do think that's a good point you made.
Going off of that, I also have CJ Stroud as my gent of the week. I think that was just overall, that game was just an insane game. We go in there and we have Haskell, Garrett, Olave, Wilson not playing, and Stroud just goes in there and just torches, Utah's defense. I mean, no one had defense in that team. I mean, it was just two Pop Warner defenses going. I will say Tommy Eichenberg had a great game, and I'm excited to see him play next year. But Stroud played great. I'm looking forward to seeing his connection with Jackson Smith and Jigba next year. Going into my NFL gent, I have no other than Joe Cool himself, Joe Burrow. I mean, the Bengals clinched the NFC North since the first time since 2014, 2015. He goes in there against the big bag Kansas City Chiefs, who are absolutely on fire the past couple weeks. And he wins the game, 446 yards, 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He just plays great. He plays guts. He just was getting flattened the whole game. I mean, it's a pretty iconic picture of him, without a last name on his jersey, just because he was getting hit so much. So Joe Burrow, he's very gutsy. He's just a winner.
Yeah, and the Bengals were down 14-0 in that game. I love his resilience to come back from 14-0, rally the troops. I thought it was an amazing stat that Jamar Chase had more receiving yards than Patrick Mahomes did passing yards. Just an incredible game from Joe Burrow. My gent of the week is going to be Russell Wilson. I don't think he had the best game out of all the quarterbacks in college football or in the NFL. I just like it as a leading your team to 51 points, kind of getting back into the groove of things. He only had 236 yards. He did have 4 touchdowns. To me, it was taking the checkdowns, being quicker with his reads and progressions, because I think that's what's hurt him this season, kind of the pre-snap, post-snap reads. And he just kind of went back to being comfortable with not throwing the deep ball every single play. A lot of checkdowns in this game, but that's what you want to see from Russell Wilson right now.
That's, very tough for me to go with the sweep of the week because I got to back up on my claim. I mean, it was the rookie year that I sided with him. I'm like, you got to give him a second year, but Tua has been this game from Tua clearly showed me that you got to move on. He's beaten only bad teams and on this winning streak that was huge for them. But with the Titans, I don't think the Titans have that many good players. To be honest, they got Byard, and then Jeffrey Simmons is a bad man at D tackle, big time Pro Bowl snub. He's hard, but other than that, they just got a bunch of guys, and they got a good defensive coach who has like 25 years of NFL experience at this point, and he's a very smart man. In Vrabel, he just knows what's going on, and he knows how to confuse a young quarterback because he did that for all those years with New England. And I mean, there's not that much talent though, and clearly Tua does not see the field very well, and his grandma hip is clearly coming back on him. He doesn't have great mobility. I thought you had to give him a second year because I just don't like giving up on the quarterback after 1 year. I mean, I really don't like giving up on the quarterback after 2 years because look at Josh Allen. But I think if you're the Dolphins with that defense, with the picks you have, just the play. I mean, Waddle looks good. I mean, if you got Deshaun Watson, you have Will Fuller. I know he didn't do anything this year, but you keep him around, especially if you got Deshaun Watson, and just then you got to move on because it's for the betterment of the team. You know what Tua is at this point.
I just think the tough thing with Tua is this NFL draft doesn't really have any, oh my God, this is a generational talent quarterback. Like, I just don't see them. Who are they going to draft and to replace Tua? I feel like Tua will be the starter going into next year, unless they make a trade to get someone like Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, and with Tua, my pro comp for him coming out was Alex Smith. And if you remember, Alex Smith had a very similar first couple years of his career as Tua has had. I think Tua is one of those guys. He's clearly not going to get as long of a leash as Alex Smith did in San Francisco. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Tua kind of phase out of relevance. And then in 4 years, he's a really smart quarterback. His processor is super high. He can get the ball out of his hands super quick, and he kind of has a revival to his career, similar to Alex Smith. But as of right now, unless you're Drew Brees, just every single play, just dialed in, going through your reads really quickly, there's no upside for Tua unless he's that super high processor taking care of the football quarterback. And he's been mistake prone this season, and his processor hasn't been as quick as you want out of a guy who isn't very physically talented.
Sam, just because you said it, I wanted to because there clearly isn't any good quarterbacks. I hope that this leads teams to make the push to go all. I mean, I've been telling all our Browns fans at school, forget Baker. I mean, because he could be the sweep of the week every week because he is terrible. But you got to get rid of Baker and just go all in. Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, hell, like just give up the picks. Get Aaron Rodgers. You saw it with Tampa Bay giving Tom Brady all he wanted. I know they acquired him by free agency. And then now if the Rams can make a run with Stafford, they had pretty much all that he needed. And they're like, well, we need the quarterback. They go for Stafford. If they can make a run with him and show that this somewhat works, I mean, it's all about, believing in your team and believing in the guys in your building and going and getting the player. The quarterbacks do elevate everyone, don't grow on trees. So why not pay everything to go get him? I'm as a Patriots fan, I'm not 100% sold on Mac Jones. I would have traded up. I'm a big believer in go get the guy who you think is, whether you think it's Fields or Trevor Lawrence. A couple years ago, if you thought it was Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen or like if you see the guy and you get him in the building, just like how the Niners thought Trey Lance was the guy, I'm all for it. Take the home run, especially with a proven guy like Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think this is a conversation for a different day, but I think with the Patriots drafting Mac Jones, it's a very high floor, lower ceiling move where Mac Jones, I think projecting into the NFL, probably projected the best out of all those rookies. And we've seen that his rookie year, but kind of going into the future, I'm not sure you want to draft Jimmy Garoppolo, Kirk Cousins, these quarterbacks in this tier in the first round of the NFL draft. You see these guys get drafted in the second, third, fourth round for a reason, end up being starters, end up being really good starters, exceeding their draft pick. But at some point, you want a guy who you don't have to have the best defense in the league. You don't have to have great weapons. A guy who can give you a little bit of leeway in terms of roster building. But then those guys end up, getting paid huge sums of money. So I think with the Patriots, if they could capitalize on this rookie deal window, that would have been a great pick. But that's a tangent for a different day.
Yeah, I mean, even if, like Murphy, you were saying talking about, Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson being free agents. I mean, even teams like if, the Browns were to go after Jimmy Garoppolo, and I think he'd be a good game manager more than Baker will ever be. And even a player like Tyler Huntley, I think he, has starting quarterback potential because he's a winner. Like we've seen him play well with the Ravens. I know that one game they decided to go for 2 and they weren't able to, convert 2 for the win, but he was in that game the whole time. So he's a special player too. But getting into my sweep of the week, I do have the unfortunate Mike Glennon. Started for the Giants, 4 for 11, 24 yards, 2 interceptions, 5.3 passer rating, which, I mean, that's horrendous. The poor guy. The Giants team is a wreck. I don't know if Joe Judge will be there start week 1 of next year, but, I mean, reports are saying he is going to be the coach next year, which I think that would be a travesty for the New York Giants.
Yeah, my sweep of the week was Mike Glennon as well. I want to say minimum of 10 starts. Mike Glennon has the lowest win percentage out of a quarterback in NFL history at 19%. I hate dunking on Mike Glennon. He has a long neck. He's a funny looking guy. Not the greatest quarterback in the world either. There's something about those super, super tall quarterbacks that just usually doesn't work in the NFL. Mike Glennon, a horrible performance. Nothing really else to say there.
Yeah, who knows if the Giants figure it out. I don't know why they ever hired Gettleman. I know he built that Panthers team, but he's just made every wrong pick for them. And I mean, I think last year was the Saquon pick. I was having a debate with friends, is he a bust? It's like, no, you can't qualify him as a bust. I mean, who takes a running back at 2 in the modern NFL? Who takes Daniel Jones at 6 when you could have gotten him at 25? I mean, Noah Board. And I think the biggest one is the Andrew Thomas pick last year. I mean, you had Jedrick Wells, Wirfs, and Becton all go. I mean, those guys are all been named to a Pro Bowl or an All-Pro in their first 2 years. And Andrew Thomas is just, there as the fourth overall pick, the first tackle from that group when he should have been the 4th tackle. Just picks like that. And obviously Joe Judge, who knows? I thought he'd work, but he's just freaked out and he's been a head case. Just, you saw what he saw this week. He's like, people are coming to play for us. And I forget who said that a couple years ago. And one coach who got fired, he said, people want to come play for us. And it's just like, don't lie. Like, you're not convincing anyone, man.
Yeah. And I thought this Mike Glennon performance potentially made Daniel Jones look a little bit better, because Daniel Jones obviously is significantly better than Mike Glennon. And the offense has looked significantly better with Daniel Jones there, which I guess that's somewhat of a good sign, even though that's not very impressive being better than Mike Glennon. And Jason Garrett a little bit. This offense has been so much worse without Jason Garrett. I think Jason Garrett sucks. I don't think he should have been hired in the first place. I think it was a joke that they hired him. But now that he's gone, potentially he was hiding some warts on this team. This team just doesn't have a lot of talent on it. Simple as that.
Well, Mike, sorry, not to cut you off, Sam, if you're about to talk. You saw who replaced him, though, right? Good old Freddie Kitchens.
Yeah.
Jason Garrett, somehow he lasted, like 7 years as Dallas's coach. But, I mean, he had 1 or 2 winning seasons. I mean, Freddie Kitchens had like 5 weeks where he was, the 15 minutes of fame. And they're like, how about a head coaching job? I mean, he is terrible. He's the play caller now. Just so many mistakes.
Yeah, the Giants are a dumpster fire. I really think they hired Joe Judge trying to like rekindle that Tom Coughlin, hard nose, get your lunch pail, like work ethic kind of energy, but seems to be a failure. Moving into our next topic, we have our rapid fire week 18 NFL Pickum. We'll go around saying who we think is going to win and, just, add a little 1 or 2 words about why we think who's going to win. So Saturday we have 2 games. We have the Kansas City Chiefs at the Denver Broncos. I'm going to go with the Chiefs this game. I think they historically the past couple of years have been dominating the Broncos, 12 straight wins versus the Broncos. And I think they're just going to, they're going to go in there and just take care of business like they always do.
Yeah, I think the Chiefs are going to win this game. I just think with the Broncos, not enough firepower offensively, especially with Drew Lock in there. I think Teddy Bridgewater's looked better. So I think the Chiefs defense prevails in this one.
The Chiefs, I don't know what gets the Broncos up for this game. I feel like their coach, he should have never been hired. He's clearly a coordinator. Fangio, he should be fired if the Broncos want to do anything, especially if they're trying to get a real quarterback in the offseason. The only way they win is if this team fights for their coach. And if I were them, I'd mail it in.
Moving to the next game, we have Dallas out Philadelphia. Philadelphia is hot right now. I think they're going to win this game. I see Dallas, benching some starters to get rested for the playoffs, such as Zeke, Tyron Smith. So I think that the Eagles are going to go in there with some, some energy and some fire and get a win against a hated division rival.
That's fair. I think the Cowboys are going to win this game just because I think Dak Prescott at this point in his career understands the importance of momentum. They played a really bad game against the Cardinals last week. I think they've finally started to figure out Tony Pollard is the guy. Ezekiel Elliott was somewhat benched in this Cardinals game. So I think Tony Pollard leads this team to a victory.
I'm really torn. I kind of just want to go with that. It's a pick 'em at this point. I was looking at the spread at Dallas 7 points, and that means that I feel like Sam might be right about them wanting to bench some guys, and they have the division wrapped up. And if things stay the same, they play Philly the next week, and they could be setting themselves up to be Pittsburgh of last year against Cleveland. I really don't know. I'm gonna go with Dallas because they have Dak, and I agree with what Michael said about the momentum, but I could just easily see Dallas benching some guys and mailing it in and losing.
Yeah.
Next game, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers at Baltimore Ravens, potentially Big Ben's last game in a Steelers uniform. I'm going to go with the Ravens here. I think they're just going to play spoiler to, Big Ben's retirement party and get the dub here against a hated division rival.
I'm going to go Pittsburgh in this one. I know it is at Baltimore, but I think Pittsburgh is playing for a bit higher stakes at this point. I'm pretty sure they need less things to happen in order to make the playoffs at this point over the Ravens. They played really inspired football with Big Ben's last home game, so I do think they played inspired football and get the dub for Big Ben.
Yeah, I agree with Mike. Pittsburgh gets this. They play for him just like they did against Cleveland. And, I feel like they're going to, I don't know. Who knows if Lamar's ready to go? I just really think if Lamar plays, I like Pittsburgh even more just because they're not going to be able to do what they do with him kind of being, who knows, whatever he is, 70, 80%. I feel like they'll give him a go. But if Huntley plays, they have a better chance.
Watch out for T.J. Watt to set the single season record with one. He needs 1.5 sacks. Next game, we have the Cincinnati Bengals at Cleveland Browns. I'm going to go with the Browns here. I think that it would be very, very dumb for Zach Taylor to start Joe Burrow here. He's been banged up the past couple of weeks. He gets beat up all the time. So I think they're going to not start their main guys, and the Browns are going to get a win here.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the Bengals. I think those are good points you just made, just because the surprise of the season for the Bengals, for me, has been their defensive line play. It's been so excellent all season, and the Browns receivers are just so bad. And Baker, I know Baker's not playing in this game, but even if it's Keenum, the receivers have been so bad to the point where I don't think Nick Chubb affects this game just enough to get the win. So I do like the Bengals in this one.
I'm going to go with the Browns because my gut tells me that Zach Taylor isn't going to play Burrow because he really shouldn't play him. I wouldn't be – if Burrow plays, I'd probably go with the Bengals, but I really, really think because all our Browns fans at school complain about how they always play pretty bad against the Bengals. They don't beat them when they should because the season is over and the Browns live in permanent misery. The one time that they, don't really need the win against the Bengals, they get it.
Our next game, we have the Green Bay Packers at the Detroit Lions. This is a pointless game for the Packers. They already locked up, Lambeau is the way to go to the Super Bowl. Rodgers seems like he wants to play, and I'm going to go with the Packers here, regardless of if Rodgers plays or not.
I'm going to go with the Packers in this one. The Lions I don't even think Jared Goff is playing. Boyle isn't the best player. I think we see some Jordan Love magic in the second half in this game as well.
Wouldn't be shocked if the Lions really showed some fight and picked up a win that really screwed them in the draft position because they're the Lions. But I think the Packers. Jordan Love looks like he might be. I kind of like him. I think he might be a player, but he's got a long way to go. This is the type of game to play him in, so I'm gonna go with the Packers.
Next game, we have Tennessee at Houston. I'm gonna go with the Titans here. I just think they, just have a lot of momentum. They want to go into the playoffs hot, and they're just playing really good football. I know the Texans aren't as bad as people think they are, but I think Tennessee will win here.
I'm going to go gut feeling Texans here. I just think the Titans are such a volatile team. I know they're the 1 seed right now, but I genuinely think they are one of those teams that truly can beat and truly can lose against any team. I think the Texans show a lot of effort under David Culley, which they have all season. I think Davis Mills gets down here.
I'm going to go with the Titans because I think Vrabel's going to stress the point of them, the importance of the number 1 seed. And I think the Texans got their win against the Titans earlier this year. I don't know how they get two of them, but if they do, that really, I don't believe in Tennessee to do anything in the playoffs. But if they lose the Texans, they're a first-round exit.
Next game, we have the Indianapolis Colts at the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Colts haven't won a game at Jacksonville since 2014, and this is the year they finally win. They, go hop on the back of Jonathan Taylor, my MVP in my heart. Colts win.
I hope the Colts win. I'm going to pick the Colts to win. If they lose this game, I don't even know. I think Frank Reich is a good enough coach to pull a win out of his rear end. That's all I'm going to say.
Colts, the Jaguars are dead. They got destroyed last week. They don't. Who in that locker room wants to be there?
Next game, we have Chicago at Minnesota. This is a really tough game for me. I can see both teams winning, but I'm going to go with the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, I like the Chicago Bears in this one as well. I don't think Justin Fields is playing, and the Matt Nagy offense is so indicative of getting the ball out of your hands quickly. That's why statistically they've had more points per game and just yards per game in the passing game without Justin Fields. So I think we continue to see that phenomenon, whether it is Andy Dalton or Nick Foles. I think they play well enough to win this game.
I think I'm going to go with Bears as well, just because it seems like, there was that game when Nagy missed with COVID and they played so much better than they did the previous five, the previous 5 games and pretty much the next 5 games. And then they've known for like about 2 weeks that they're going to fire him. And they've looked like a new team. So they clearly got some, and they also have every reason to win because they don't have their pick.
Next game, we have Washington at the New York Giants. I think what's more interesting than this game is, the fact that Washington's going to finally pick a football team in February. So this game is just a dumpster fire. Washington's going to win, but there's nothing interesting going on in this game.
Yeah, this is going to be an ugly one. I just think Washington is going to win. They have more defensive talent. Daniel Jones is questionable, I think, but I don't think he's going to play. I just think Taylor Heineke is better than Mike Lennon, and I think that quarterback difference, even though it's small, I think it gets the win for Washington.
I want to say the Giants just to play spoiler, but Jake Fromm is starting, so it's got to be the football team.
Next game, we have Seattle at Arizona. I mean, this is kind of a useless game for both teams. Cardinals are already locked up. I mean, it's not useless. The Cardinals need to have the Rams lose in order to win the division, but I think it will not matter because I think the Seattle Seahawks are going to win. I think Russell Wilson's going to go in there and, put on a show for potentially his last game in a Seahawks uniform. And the Cardinals are, 3-4 at home. They're not playing – they don't play well at home, so I think the Seahawks are going to win this game.
Yeah, coming off a great week for the Seahawks, I could see them riding momentum and winning this game, playing spoiler for the Cardinals, just a little bit spoiler in terms of not winning the division. But I think the Cardinals are going to win this game just because I think the Cardinals roster is better than the Seahawks. And I genuinely believe Kyler Murray at this point in their career is better than Russell Wilson. So I think that quarterback discrepancy will be enough to get the win.
I'm going with the Cardinals. I love Kyler Murray. I don't know if he's necessarily better than Russell Wilson, Mike. I like the fire of that take, but I don't know if I'm ready to decide yet, but it's got to be the Cardinals because I think they know that the Niners are going to be playing their life out against the Rams to get into the playoffs. And if they win one game, I mean, they looked pretty dead with those 3 straight, but they can win these last 2 here and get that division that they looked like they were on pace to roll with for most of the season. And that'd be a big get for that team.
Next game, we have New Orleans at Atlanta. I'm going to go with the Falcons. I just think that, there's not many implications going into this game. I just think the Falcons just want to beat a division rival.
Yeah, I'm going to go Falcons as well. I think the Saints, if they win, they need a few things to happen in order to make the playoffs. I believe they need the Rams to win and then one more thing to happen. It's pretty far-fetched that the Saints are going to make the playoffs, but I just think offensively, the Saints have nothing right now. And defensively, they've been so great all season, but I think they've been so discouraged by the offense to the point where I think they'll let one slip and let Atlanta score some points.
I'm going with the Saints because they only need, if they win, they just need the Rams to lose. That's the only thing they need. And or Rams to beat the Niners, excuse me. That's all they need to get in. And Matt Ryan has just looked so washed to me in the couple times I've seen him, throw a pick or, fumble on red zone or, watch a drive or two here when they've been in these they always play in close games, and he just seems so done. I like that same Saints defense. If they can just get, a little rest from some quarterback play, some offensive movement. And also I just still think Alvin Kamara is that guy.
Next game, we have the New York Jets at the Buffalo Bills. I'm going to go with the Bills. The Jets are not a great football team. The Bills are a playoff team, and they kind of need to win this game. And so hopefully if they want to win the division. So I'm going to go with the Bills.
I think this is potentially a close game, but I think the Bills, coming off of last week winning because of the running game, seeing how their demise has been the reliance on Josh Allen, I think they try to establish the run and have some success doing so, the Bills.
I really want to say the Jets because then the Patriots would get the division. And also a couple years ago when the trick, little history lesson, they looked like they were going to make the playoffs. And then the next week, the Bills, who had like 5 wins, beat the Jets because of Rex Ryan, just to play spoiler. I really wouldn't be shocked, and I think it will be a close game. I think the Bills are going to come out flat, but Josh Allen is going to pull it out. It'll be the Bills, but it's like a 17-point spread. I bet you that's within a touchdown.
Next game, we have one of the better games of the week. We have the San Francisco 49ers at the LA Rams. I'm going to go with the Rams. I think they want to win the division bad, and I know the 49ers, they play the Rams tough. They need to win this game to get into the playoffs, but I think the Rams pull this out. They had a gutsy game last week, and they pulled it out, so I'm going to go with the Rams.
Yeah, so at the beginning of the season, the 49ers actually blew the Rams out 31-10, and I just think this 49ers team, matchup-wise, is such a tough matchup for the 49er or for the Rams, to the point where I do like the 49ers in this one. I think it's going to take some heroics from Matt Stafford to win this game, and he's struggled recently, so I like the 49ers.
Yeah, I got to agree with Mike. I think that the matchup is just too much there, and that game was kind of like the Niners needed to keep themselves alive for the win, and it's the exact same thing here. And if they want to keep the season going, they got to win. And This one is obviously in LA, and I don't know how they stopped Cooper Kupp. I'm sorry, Sam. I think Cooper Kupp gets the record, even though that record is not going to last long. In the long run, there's bound to be someone who gets 2,000. It's not going to be him, but he'll probably get Calvin Johnson's record this week in a losing effort, though. I think the Niners get it done.
Next game, we have New England at Miami. I think the Patriots win. The Dolphins just, they were hot for a while, but after last week, I think they just can't get it up here.
Yeah, I think these are better coached. They have a better quarterback. They're skill position players, though on paper potentially not as good. They show up week to week more so than the Dolphins. So I like the Patriots in this game.
Yeah, the Patriots, I don't know how Belichick lets them lose, especially just because of how they saw them in week 1, and now they're seeing them the ending week of the season. And that game is still fresh in everyone's mind because they lost by like 1 or 2 points, and they really need that win right now. That would have them the division, and I think they're going to, at least I know Belichick wants to make Flores and the Dolphins pay.
Next game, we have Carolina at Tampa Bay. The Panthers, at the beginning of the year, they started off hot, but they just been slowly falling apart more and more. And I think the Buccaneers, despite having, injuries and meltdowns, win this game.
I think this could potentially be a close game. These teams played, I want to say 2 weeks ago, and the Buccaneers blew them out. I think the Buccaneers work out some kinks and some rusts with some of the receivers that haven't gotten a lot of playing time. I think this is kind of a tune-up game for the playoffs, but I do think the Buccaneers are going to win nonetheless.
It's going to be Tampa Bay because Carolina, it's actually, obviously I love Tom. I watch Tampa Bay just like the Patriots now until he's gone because it's Tom Brady. But I was really big on the Panthers coming into the year. I thought that they would make a run at finishing second in that division, maybe playoffs. I didn't think playoffs, but 9-8, just outside, and 2-11 of their last 13. I mean, like there's stuff about Rule being gone. I mean, I'm completely, that was my big whiff. I was big on the Panthers heading into the year, and they've completely collapsed.
Moving on to our last game, the game of the week, when you're in, Chargers at Las Vegas. I'm going to go with the Las Vegas Raiders. I think they're just really hot right now. You know, they sad to say, but they want to win for John Madden with his passing, and I think that they, win this game for their the biggest game in Las Vegas football history.
I am so excited for this football game. This is week 18 football, baby. This is the definition of just your win, you're in. Divisional opponent, AFC West football. I think the Chargers are going to get it done. I think even if Derek Carr plays better than Justin Herbert's, which is a huge if, I still think the Chargers overall are better than the Raiders and are going to get the win.
Yeah, week 18, winning you're in, nothing better, right, Mike? That's said it perfectly. There's always one game like this at the end of the season, and it's going to be a great game. And I think I got to go Chargers. Just they're the Chargers. One of my best friends at school is a big Chargers fan. I always give him, a lot of stuff because I'm not a big Philip Rivers guy and all that. But Herbert just seems so different. The Chargers seem somewhat cursed to me, but I think Herbert is just so good. He's just generational good. Him and Burrow coming out of the same class is going to be a crazy look back in 10 years. And I think he balls out on Sunday.
Well, there you have it. We want to thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.